think on a daily basis we spend a lot of time focusing on discussion, and we spend a lot of time on making it productive discussion, where it's not just one student giving their ideas or giving their opinions, but it's students working together either through think, pair, share, or working in their small groups where we're building kind of knowledge as a group. A lot of times, even when we do share out as a whole class, it's after the students have already discussed it, so the ideas have kind of been gone through a few times, and I'm not getting kind of the first answer that comes to their mind. I'm getting the answer that they worked on, and I think that really helps out because the students are more comfortable. And I think the fact that we have the discussion, students know that participation is expected in my class, and a lot of the students feel comfortable with that because it's something that happens on a daily basis. A lot of the things that we do involve the students working with different people, and they really enjoy the opportunity to show their knowledge and to show what they have learned. A lot of things that I do will also include front-loading subjects so that students come into class with some knowledge, and that makes it so that their answers are less approximate and more certain and fact-based to begin discussions in class. It is a challenge to find the right subject for a seminar, especially when you're doing the first or second one with a group. So you have to be strategic. The starting point is usually the unit plan and the curriculum, but there are certain things that we want to do. We're a Renzulli school, so one of the things that I want to do is I want to include student choice. So sometimes I will offer students 2 choices of seminars that we will hold. Also, paying attention to student choice. When I have surveyed classes, more than 2/3 of the students really enjoy doing seminars, and it's something that they would like to do. So there are a bunch of factors. For the specific topic, I'm usually looking for something that is a challenge. Because a challenging topic in history class is something that I'm going to spend more than 1 day on, 2 days on anyways. So if it's a topic we're going to have a seminar on, that means we're spending a week on it, a week and a half on it, so that they get the breadths and the depth of knowledge so that they can have the discussion. It's also important that there are multiple viewpoints that are worthy of discussion, worthy of investigation. The goal of a seminar is not to make everybody agree. The goal of a seminar is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share their ideas. So I want to make sure that it's not a clear-cut yes or no answer. It's students discussing and kind of exploring their own ideas through discussion, and then we usually try and move that discussion into a writing assignment. So it's a challenging subject with a lot of information, and it's something that generally the students have an interest in because students do better that way. It is a challenge with 30 to 35 students assessing all the students. So a lot of the things that I will do is even before the seminar takes place, there will be assessments so that I know that students have an understanding of the subject and that it's not the material that's going to be the barrier for them participating in class. Also assessing in class, what I will do is I will listen to student responses, and I will use the verbal response rubric that we've used, and I will score them generally based on the details they use between a 1 and 4, so that when a student participates verbally, that is another piece of data I will use. Another form of assessment is at times we will pass out agree or disagree questions, which sometimes happen during a pause in the conversation, or sometimes they will emphasize a point that I wanted to make sure that the students didn't pass over. So if there's a lull in the conversation, or if I think we are in danger of missing a key point, I will pass out one of those agree-disagree questions, and the students will focus in on that. And then when the conversation picks up, everybody has had a chance to give that one specific question some thought, and the students may either pick up with where the conversation was or with the agree-disagree question. And I find that gives a lot of our more reluctant students to participate more time to kind of gather their ideas. It's important that everybody has that opportunity, and the students are really good about, if they see somebody who is willing to participate, who is more reluctant, that they generally want that person to. So it's really kind of a positive setting. With the 30 to 35 students, when I have clocked the number of responses, if I do a 2-period seminar, that can be 120 student participation opportunities. So in a class of 30, ideally that works out to 4 per student. Realistically, you have some students who participate 12 times and some who may not, but generally the percentage that does not is, under 10%. So it's important to keep that in mind. I think one of the best things about a seminar is there are countless opportunities to assess, and even if you have a seminar in the same class, you may be assessing different things at different times. To assess the successfulness, clearly you're sitting there and you're listening to the student ideas. Usually I will be using the verbal response rubric and scoring students, but there's also kind of a qualitative feel where you get the students and you get kind of the energy where the students want to participate. And when a seminar is going well, you get the feeling that even if the students aren't looking up, it's because they're looking through their notes or because they're listening to the ideas of students, or they can't wait to participate themselves. So there are a bunch of factors. I also pay attention to the short answers that we pass out, the agree, disagree, and there's a 4-point rubric on those. One of the most important tools for assessing the success of a seminar is the reflection page I have students fill out. And what that does is it gives them the opportunity to summarize the conversation. It gives them an idea, it gives them an opportunity to say how the conversation changed their viewpoint. And they also get to react to something somebody said in the seminar. There's a self-evaluation tool. And the question I like best is if there was, what would you want to have said during the seminar that you didn't have the opportunity? Because a lot of times when you're in class and the conversation's happening, you leave the classroom, walk 5 feet down the hallway and think of a great point. So it makes it so that the seminar may be a finite point in time, but that the ideas expressed carry on beyond that. Following that, we also like to do writing assignments with our seminars. It's in line with our instructional focus that we use these high quality discussions and that we create writing products that show the students in their knowledge and mastery of the main ideas of a seminar. The best example is following our Salem Witch seminar. The students had an opportunity to write a letter about how the Salem witch trials impacted Salem from a colonial viewpoint. So it gives them an opportunity to show their knowledge and to work on writing, which is another focus and another component of our instructional focus. I think with planning for a seminar, it's important that it kind of comes from the school instructional focus, where it is kind of the highest level of conversation you can have in the class, where ideally if a seminar is working well in my class, it is 95% student driven, and that's kind of the discussion where it's the students creating the ideas and working with the ideas of others rather than, possibly me giving them ideas and having them expand upon those. So it's kind of where they get to create the knowledge. I think the Socratic Seminar works very closely with the Danielson rubric, especially with questioning. And it's not just the questioning for the seminar, it's the questioning on the daily basis leading up to the seminar. So you develop the questions, and it's not the 3 or 4 central questions or the one overarching question for the seminar that are the most important. Those are important, but the questions you lead the students up to the preparation so that they investigate the subject more completely and that they have text-based details and the specific details that they can discuss, and that they know the academic vocabulary and they can have a discussion that you would be surprised that a 7th grade classroom could have, whether it's an ICT class or other class. With the questioning, it's important that it's not yes or no questions, and it's important that the bias isn't present in questions. You don't want to lead the students one way or the other, because that's not going to lead to a organic conversation. That's going to lead towards the students trying to answer the way they think you want them to. With questioning, it's also important to have sub-questions or follow-up questions. It's best when the students are the ones asking those. So a lot of times when I create scaffolds for students preparing for a seminar, we will use charts, and they will do note form of their text-based details so that they have more pages where it's readily accessible. Also with scaffolds in a lot of the classes, I will have the students try and plan out the questions they may ask as a follow-up. A lot of times when they read a question for a seminar, they immediately ask questions of their own, so it's worthwhile for them to write those down and consider asking those as a follow-up to the class. And it's important to stress to the students it doesn't have to be a yes or no answer, and you don't need to have an answer to your own question to ask it. With working with other scaffolds, it's important to keep in mind that the students are the ones who want to, that I want to give the information. So with those scaffolds, I try and make it so that the students are organizing information, and I try and make sure that they have enough materials that are on their level. So a lot of times there may be one central reading for a seminar, but there will be maybe a reading that gives the opposing viewpoint. There will be a more challenging reading that I may augment it with. There may be a easier reading or a maybe less verbally dense reading for the students.
Where do you get these resources and readings from?
I mean, I do most of my research on the internet, and it's for one seminar, it could be the students having 7, 8, 9 different articles that they have an opportunity to use. A lot of the students, when they're interested in a topic, one of the favorite ones is the Salem witch trials. A lot of times I'll find out that students will be bringing in their own materials to participate. In our next seminar, which is talking about were the colonists justified, I have a social studies book club where the students have been reading 2 books about the Revolutionary War and about reasons why colonists disagreed with England. So I'm expecting those students to bring in information. And because we do these seminars on topics that interest students, a lot of times they're motivated to find their own resources and bring those in. And I think it's really interesting, and I think it makes for a more engaging conversation when you have 2 students who have brought in their own resources that either agree or disagree, and it takes the conversation in a different manner. So one of the challenges for planning a seminar is to make it so that the students are going to direct the conversation. And in the classroom, it's normal for teachers to want to control where the class goes and where a conversation goes. That's one of those instincts that you have to kind of suppress while the students are having their conversation. So the first question that I would like to ask is, do you think the English were justified in their actions towards the colonists?
Although the best choice might have been to give them a say in the government and then tax them, to let them understand that they were actually being taxed very minimal.
The English were at a man being justified with their taxes. I said yes because because the colonists were living under their roof, they didn't need to pay them back. But I also said no because they put too much taxes. The government needed to provide more services, such as giving the colonists a say in parliament or a representative.
But I would also like to add that the English, they got back at the colonists in a non-harming way where there would be no casualties, and it would also pay off debts from the French and Indian War.
What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take one and pass it to the right. And the agree-disagree statement is, I think that the English should have placed higher taxes on the colonists so that they would pay similar taxes to people living in England.
No. The Sugar Act reduced the rate of tax on molasses from 6 pence to 3 pence per gallon, so that shows that how the tax is being lowered rather than being raised.
I said I disagreed with this statement because the colonists were already angry enough at the idea of taxes. According to the synonym article, it states the colonists disagreed. In Parliament's view, a justified way of raising revenue. The colonists disagreed, declaring they would not abide by any taxes unless they were represented in Parliament. No taxation without representation became the colonists' answer. So, if the English increased the taxes, simple logic would state that the colonists would get more angry at higher taxes, and that would lead to like really bad consequences.
Well, isn't fair how the English gives the colonists protection, but they're paying less taxes than the people living in England? And the colonists could have died without the help of the redcoats from England, so they should be paying more for the gratitude.
There was a quote in the packet he gave us, and it said that Parliament seemed intent on slowing the colony's growth and protecting British economic interests at the colonists' expense. Royal officials had restricted westward expansion, levied taxes without the colonists' consent, and stationed a standing army in the colonists in peacetime. This shows that Parliament actually didn't want the colonists to grow and form like a bigger nation and let them expand westward. They just wanted extra profits.
Well, to respond to what you said, Stephen, I would just like to add something quickly that this might have not been easy to do. Like, if they're going to send a ship like every other month, do you think they could do that with the amount of tax and burden that is upon them already?
And also, as Jay Cotton said, who is a Massachusetts legislator, he said that no part of His Majesty's dominions can be taxed without the consent. This would seem to contradict the theory of the Constitution.
So I think that higher taxes should be paid, but I also see the different perspectives, such as Gloria was explaining with the representation in Parliament.
The English and the colonists already had a huge, a really strong tension between them because of all the taxes that they already gave, and the colonists revolted many of them, and these would have caused worse conditions and more rebellions against the English.
Was it justified for the English to have the revolution or not?
Well, Max, I was looking at this article. The American Revolution was a mistake, and then I changed my opinion because it said, as a result of the American Revolution, the tax burden tripled.
What I want us to do as a group is I want us to investigate Andy's question a little bit more closely. And Andy's question was about the justification of the Boston Massacre. And the Boston Massacre is a key point as to what we've studied so far. What I'd like to ask is, do we think, or where do we think the Boston Massacre went wrong, or who could we attribute the success or failure of the Boston Massacre, and what is the impact of the Boston Massacre on the mindset of the colonists and of the English? So who is responsible for the Boston Massacre, and kind of what impact does it have? And you can look at it from either the English or the colonist side.
The colonists actually might have caused the Boston Massacre to go wrong, because in the article it states, "Let us drive out these rascals. They have no business here. Drive them out." At the same, parties of soldiers whom were letting loose the dogs of war were about going the street, boasting of their valor, insulting citizens with their coarse words, and striking many of their sticks and sheath swords. Although England obviously had some wrong defects, the colonists, after finally seeing this revolution or Noir massacre, decided they were going to take action. And this caused even more trouble to be caused. After all, in the end, people were only shot after someone yelled out, "Why are you not firing?" And once they heard fire, they accidentally shot a couple of these colonists.
And I think that what caused that, like I could see both sides, and in Documents it states, but Tux, who was a colonist, aimed to blow at the head of Captain Preston, and he was with the group of people with the soldiers. And then after that, Mr. Tux was taunting the soldiers, saying, "Why don't you fire? Why don't you fire?" And then that caused the soldiers to eventually fire and kill 9 colonists.
But Document A, as Max said, claims that it was a barber shop. So I'm not sure we can exactly judge who started it, but there are 2 accounts, and there's probably many more with different have like a huge diversity at who is at fault, so we can't exactly determine who started the Boston Massacre. But maybe we can determine later on whose fault was it for extending the Boston Massacre and not ending it when they had the chance. Maybe that's something we can determine better than what was the catalyst.
I would also like to point out that document A, as everybody is referring to, may be considered biased towards the colonists because it is written by a man who was witnessed the Boston Massacre and was a colonist.
I realize that, George, but don't you think that a person who experienced it firsthand would have more information than the textbook that just received it from a bunch of secondary sources?
I agree with your point, but I still think that they would want to make it seem as if they were more heroic than they actually were.
According to document A, it states the violent agitation of the citizens not only on account of abuse offered to the boy, but of other causes of excitement. So this quote shows how citizens were agitated pretty much due to the taxes, the fire, and the abuse to the boy, which was immaculate.
But I would also like to pose the question that many of us are starting to discuss. What were some actions that could have been taken to avoid this Boston Massacre?
There were steps that English could have taken to stop the Boston Massacre. Well, not stop as it already happened, but they could have done like damage control afterwards. To you guys, it might seem like a paradox, and that the only way out is the American Revolution. It's inevitable. But in my opinion, it's not inevitable. Because the English could have just given the colonists what they wanted from the beginning. Repeal the acts, such as the Declaration Act, and reduce the tax rates, and that would have made the colonists really happy. Do you think that they would prefer leaving and having to fend for themselves a new country, or having all they wanted and the English could just supply it to them? So basically, if the English gave them what they wanted, they're like tying the colonists to them because there would be gratitude and they would want to stay where there was safety and where they could have what they wanted.
I agree with Arlene's statement that the American Revolution was inevitable because the British conducted multiple actions leading to the Boston Massacre. For example, they protected the British soldiers and officials when they were accused of murder and harmed the colonists. For example, they cut off their trade and they imposed taxes on the colonists without their consent. They could have avoided the Boston Massacre by just following their Bill of Rights, which was no taxation without representation. And if they just asked for permission, they could have put the taxes on them and it could have been fair.
I kind of see where you're trying to say, but on the other hand, the colonists weren't being told at all that they were going to be taxed before they were taxed, so therefore they would have really no knowledge on, is this tax actually helpful to England, or are they just trying to get money from us? I'm trying to answer Samantha's question before, that was there actually a way to prevent the revolution, and using Cadence's point, I don't feel that there was a way to prevent the American Revolution after the British soldiers fired at the colonists.
Do we think the colonists were justified with their anger at England? Do we think that there was reason and logic behind their disagreement?
Well, yes and no, although they had no say in the government, and they were given various taxes, and these taxes just built up one after the other. But from the British's point of view, actually, although they were assigned these taxes without any representation, these taxes were much less than the ones that the British were already facing themselves in England. The colonists were justified in their anger with England. Since England owed much debt from the French and Indian War, the only way was to tax the colonies because they owed so much land. They pulled out many different kinds of acts, such as the Stamp Act and the Currency Act. But the Currency Act, it changed the currency a lot of times, and this would affect the colonists' trade and daily life.
I think a lot of the things that went positive are generated by the students and their responses. I think the fact that I didn't have to manage the conversation too regularly showed that the students were engaged and the students were on point and on task. I think the number of students participating was strong. Unfortunately, at times it was cycles of 5 or 6 or 7 students at one point. So I noticed a pretty significant shift in the personalities that participated at the point where I asked them to raise their hands. There were 3 or 4 students who just kind of pulled the conversation in a much better direction when that happened. So that was done on purpose to include those students, and I think that paid dividends. I think it was successful because for each of my main questions, I generally have 5 to 7 follow-up questions. And I generally like it when the students either will ask one of my follow-up questions, or if they will lead the conversation there without me having to ask the follow-up question. So a lot of times that was happening on us, especially the first 2 questions, where the students were hitting the points without me kind of dictating the conversation going there. I think that generally shows that the students and I are on the same page, that you know, they're bringing up the key points and that they're analyzing it more fully and from both sides.
Why do you think the students were able to do that without you intervening?
I think some of it has to do with the sources they had. I think the sources were varied and engaging enough for the students. I was a little bit concerned with one of the readings because it offered the strong viewpoint that the American Revolution was a mistake, and then gave a kind of economic analysis, which is very difficult for the students to understand. But I was impressed that the students pulled out kind of the key information from that and identified the key facts that they could relate to the conversation. So I think the fact that they presented multiple viewpoints and realized that there are some questionable aspects of the American Revolution, the reasons why the colonists were upset, and that sometimes the emotions of the colonists may have overcome reason or economic sense.
Thank you. So besides the lull, or no, not necessarily lull, but besides the number of students participating, was there anything else that you saw within the seminar that you would change or plan
I was a little disappointed with some of the students in my book club. They were reading Johnny Tremaine and My Brother Sam is Dead, and those are both historical fiction books about individuals and why they were involved in the fight for freedom. I would have appreciated if the 5 to 7 members of the book club that were in that group brought it up. But I kind of understand where the conversation was going. It may have been a little bit awkward and they would have had to explain a bit to their classmates. I was also a little concerned because this seminar was held on a Wednesday after Martin Luther King. So I don't see this class on Tuesday, and the previous class I had with them was Friday. So I was a little bit apprehensive about that. And 3 or 4 of the students went home early on Friday. So I think perhaps if there had been a class more close to the seminar, it would have been, some of the responses may have been more detailed, or I would have had at least one opportunity closer on to engage with the students. And with my reluctant students, I generally ask them if they're intimidated to respond to the entire class, to pick that 1 question or 2 questions that they're going to really kind of specialize in. And I think that was a check-in that would have benefited, and that it's something that I generally do, but because of the calendar, it wasn't able to occur.
Great. Just, I guess, 2 more questions for you. You've been doing Socratic Seminar now for about a year and a half. You know, we had spoken, you said you did about 10 or 12 of them so far. Have you noticed any trends throughout the seminars, and how do you adjust your planning based on these trends?
I think it depends on the class, and over the school year you pick up the personality of the class. I think when you do your first seminar of the year, you have to have something that's engaging, and generally I start off with the motivations of explorers, whether it's gold, God, and glory. And that's particularly to the conquistadores, who are these larger-than-life figures. And I think that's kind of an engaging topic. So I think you kind of pick up the personality of the class. Some trends that I notice are, if you're noticing that the students aren't prepared, or if they're not having the level discussion at their table for something like a do now or a share out at the end of class, that's not going to magically happen when you bring it to the larger group. I've noticed that in those cases, maybe it pays off to take a day and refocus the students. It's also worthwhile to give the students, if I have 2 or 3 main questions for a seminar, to give those in advance and just have a page where they can write out notes where that it's not in sentences, it's not something I'm going to correct their grammar on, it's just something where they have the ideas. And I generally recommend that they identify other sources so that they can use those text-based details kind of to cross-reference their notes. In some of the other classes, I like to scaffold out what questions they may ask and what specific text-based details they would like to add to a conversation. This has worked really well in the ICT class, and in my ICT class now, there are days where they present more text-based details than some of the other classes because they're more strategic and because they're more organized. So it really pays dividends to prepare in a meaningful manner. There are other times where, and this was particularly last year, where there was one reading or one seminar where the students just weren't getting to the point, and I reevaluated some of the preparation materials, and I presented them with maybe 2 more readings that were biased in both directions, because in history class we're talking about the bias of authors and how that plays a role. By giving them 2 biased readings, it kind of gave the students stronger opinions. And for a seminar, the students need to be engaged, but it works out much better if they're engaged because they genuinely feel one way or the other rather than they're told to state an argument. So I think it's the quality and the type of readings. And a successful seminar is when the students are really synthesizing the information and they're taking multiple sources and creating their viewpoint, and then they can verbally support their viewpoint to their classmates.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chobot. Is there anything else that you want to add to your reflection?
I think the Socratic Seminar is one of the best ways to gauge a student's learning. It's one of those class sessions that involves a lot of strategic preparation, but when it's successful, the students walk away asking you when the next one's going to happen, and that kind of motivates me to prepare for the next one.